Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. We're going to have another story time this evening. We're sharing a Grimm's fairy tale. Tonight it's going to be Tom Thumb. This fairy tale was collected and presented by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm and is read to you tonight by myself, Tennille Milam. This fairy tale, as with all the fairy tales I present, are not intended for children. So, Tom Thumb. There was once a poor countryman who used to sit in the chimney corner all evening and poke the fire while his wife sat at her spinning wheel. And he used to say, "How dull it is without any children. Our house is so quiet. Other people's houses are noisy and merry." "Oh yes," answered his wife and sighed, "if we could only have one, and that one ever so little, no bigger than my thumb. How happy I should be. It would indeed be having our heart's desire." Now it happened that after a little while the woman had a child who was perfect in all of his limbs, but no bigger than a thumb. And his parents said, "He is just what we wished for, and we will love him very much." And they named him according to his stature, Tom Thumb. And though they gave him plenty of nourishment, he grew no bigger, but remained exactly the same size as when he was first born. And he had very good faculties, and he was very quick and prudent, so that all he did prospered. One day, his father made ready to go to the forest to cut wood, and he said, as if to himself, "Now I wish there was someone to bring the cart to meet me." "Oh, father," cried Tom Thumb, "I can bring the cart. Let me alone for that, and in proper time, too." Then the father laughed and said, "How will you manage that? You're much too little to hold the reins." "That has nothing to do with it, father. While my mother goes on with her spinning, I will sit in the horse's ear, and I will tell him where to go." "Well," answered the father, "we will try it for once." When it was time to set off, the mother went on spinning, after setting Tom Thumb in the horse's ear, and so he drove off, crying, "Gee up, gee whoa." So the horse went on quiet as if his master was driving him, and he drew the wagon along the right road into the wood. Now it happened that just as they turned a corner, and the little fellow was calling, "Gee up," two strange men passed by. "Look," said one of them, "how is this? There goes a wagon, and the driver is calling to the horse, and yet he is nowhere to be seen." "This is very strange," said the other. "We will follow the wagon and see where it belongs." And the wagon went right through the wood and up to the place where the wood had been cut. When Tom Thumb caught sight of his father, he called out, "Look, father, here I am with the wagon. Now take me down." The father held the horse with his left hand, and with his right hand he lifted down his little son out of the horse's ear. And Tom Thumb sat down on a stump, quite happy and content. When the two strangers saw him, they were struck dumb with wonder. At last one of them, taking the other to the side, said to him, "Look here, the little chap would make our fortune if we were to show him in the town for money. Suppose we buy him?" So they went up to the woodcutter and they said, "Sell the little man to us, and we shall take care that no harm will come to him." "No, no," answered the father, "he is the apple of my eye, and not for all the money in the world would I sell him." But Tom Thumb, when he heard what was going on, he climbed up his father's coat tail, and perching himself on his shoulder, he whispered in his ear, "Father, you might as well let me go. I'll be right back." And the father gave him to the two men for a large piece of money, and they asked him where he would like to sit. "Oh, put me on the brim of your hat, and that way I can walk around and view the country and be in no danger of falling off." So they did as he wished, and when Tom Thumb had been taken leave of his father, they set off all together, and they traveled on until it grew dusk, and the little fellow asked to be set down for a little while for a change, and after some difficulty They consented. So the man took him down from his hat and set him in a field by the roadside, and he ran away directly. And after creeping among the furrows, he slipped suddenly into a mouse hole, which was just what he was looking for. "Good evening, my masters. You can go home without me," he cried to them, laughing. They ran up and they felt about with their sticks in the mouse hole, but all in vain. Tom Thumb crept further and further in, and as it was growing dark, they had to make the best of their way home, full of vexation and with empty purses. When Tom Thumb found they were gone, he crept out of his hiding place underground. "It is dangerous work groping about in these holes in the darkness," said he. "I might easily break my neck." But by good fortune he came upon an empty snail shell. "That's all right," said he. "Now I can get safely through the night." And he settled himself down into the snail's shell. Before he had time to get to sleep, he heard two men pass by. One was saying to the other, "How can we manage to get hold of the rich parson's gold?" "I can tell you," cried Tom Thumb. "How is this?" said one of the thieves, quite frightened. "I hear someone speaking." So they stood still and they listened, and Tom Thumb spoke again. "Take me with you, and I'll show you how to do it." "Where are you then?" asked they. "Look about on the ground and notice where the voice comes from," answered he. At last they found him, and they lifted him up. "You little elf," they said, "how can you help us?" "Look here," answered he, "I can easily creep between the iron bars of the parson's room and hand you out whatever it is you would like to have from in there." "Very well," said they, "we will try and see what you can do." So when they came to the parsonage house, Tom Thumb crept into the room, but cried out with all his might, "Will you have all that is here?" So the thieves were terrified. They said, "Shh, don't! Do speak more softly, lest anyone should be wakened." But Tom Thumb made as if he did not hear them, and he cried out very loudly again, "What would you like? Will you have all that is here?" So that the cook, who was sleeping in a room hard by, heard it, and raised herself in bed and listened. The thieves, however, in their fear of being discovered, had run back part of the way. But they took courage again, and thinking that it was only a jest of the little fellow's, they came back and they whispered to him to be serious and hand them out something. Then Tom Thumb called out once more, as loud as he could, "Oh yes, I will give it all to you, only put out your hands." Then the listening maid heard him distinctly that time, and jumped out of bed and burst open the door. The thieves ran off as if the wild huntsmen were behind them. But the maid, as she could see nothing, went to fetch a light, and when she came back with one, Tom Thumb had taken off himself, without being seen by her, into the barn. And the maid, when she had looked in every hole and corner and found nothing, went back to bed at last, and thought she must have been dreaming with her eyes open. So Tom Thumb crept among the hay, and he found a comfortable nook to sleep in, where he intended to remain until it was day, and then to go home to his father and mother. But other things were to befall him. Indeed, there is nothing but trouble and worry in the whole world. The maid got up at dawn of day to feed the cows. The first place she went was the barn, where she took up an armful of hay, and it happened to be the very heap in which Tom Thumb lay asleep. And he was so fast asleep that he was aware of nothing, and he never waked until he was in the mouth of the cow, who had taken him up with the hay. "Oh dear," cried he, "how is it that I've gotten into a mill?" But he soon found out where he was, and he had to be very careful not to get between the cow's teeth. And at last he had descended until the cow's stomach. "The windows were forgotten when this little room was built," said he, "and the sunshine cannot get in. There is no light to be had." His quarters were in every way unpleasant to him, and what was worst, new hay was constantly coming in, and the space was being filled up. At last he cried out in his extremity as loud as he could, "No more hay! No more hay for me!" The maid was then milking the cow, and as she heard a voice but could see no one, and as it was the same voice she had heard in the night, she was so frightened She fell off her stool and spilled the milk. Then she ran in great haste to her master, crying, "Oh, master dear, the cow spoke." "Ah, you must be crazy," answered her master, and he went himself to the cow house to see what was the matter. No sooner had he put his foot inside the door than Tom Thumb cried out again, "No more hay! No more hay for me!" Then the parson himself was frightened, supposing that a bad spirit had entered the cow. He ordered her to be put to death, and so she was killed. But the stomach, where Tom Thumb was lying, was thrown upon a dunghill. Tom Thumb had a great trouble to work his way out of it, and he had just made space enough for his head to get through when a great misfortune happened. A hungry wolf ran up and swallowed the whole stomach at one gulp. But Tom Thumb did not lose courage. "Perhaps," thought he, "the wolf will listen to reason." And he cried out from inside of the wolf, "My dear wolf, I can tell you where to get a splendid meal." "Where is it to be had?" said the wolf. "In such a house, and you must creep into through the drain, where you will find cakes and bacon and broth, as much as you can eat." And he described to him his father's house. The wolf needed not to be told twice. He squeezed himself through the drain in the night, and he feasted in the storeroom to his heart's content. When at last he was satisfied, he wanted to go away again, but it had become so big that to creep out the same way was impossible. This Tom Thumb had reckoned on, and began to make a terrible din inside of the wolf, crying and calling as loud as he could. "Will you be quiet?" said the wolf. "You will wake up the folks that live here." "Look here," cried the little man, "you are very well satisfied, and now I will do something for my own enjoyment." And he began again to make all the noise that he could. At last the father and mother were awakened, and they ran to the room door, and they peeped through the chink. And when they saw a wolf in occupation, they ran and fetched weapons, the man an axe, and the woman a scythe. "Stay behind," said the man, and as they entered the room, he said, "When I have given him a blow, and it does not seem to have killed him, then you must cut him with your scythe." Then Tom Thumb heard his father's voice, and he cried, "Dear father, I am here, inside of this wolf." Then the father called out full of joy, "Thank heaven that we have found our dear child." And he told his wife to keep the scythe out of the way, lest Tom Thumb should be hurt with it. And then he drew near, and he struck the wolf such a blow on the head that he fell down dead. And then he fetched a knife and a pair of scissors, and he slit up the wolf's body, and he let the little fellow out. "Oh, what anxiety we have felt about you," said the father. "Yes, father, I have seen a good deal of the world, and I am very glad to breathe fresh air again." "Well, where have you been all of this time?" asked the father. "Oh, I have been in a mouse's hole, I have been in a snail's shell, and in a cow's stomach, and inside of a wolf. Now, I think I'll stay home." "And we would not part with you for all the kingdoms of the world," cried the parents. And they kissed and hugged their dear little Tom Thumb, and they gave him something to eat and drink and a new suit of clothes, as his old ones were soiled with travel. That is the end of Tom Thumb, and in our next story time we'll do the sequel, Tom Thumb's Travels. So thanks for joining me, and until next time, y'all be sweet.